say 5:32. It could be 5:33, but I think it's 5:32 of just joshing. I am your host, Joshua Pantellaresco. I write stuff, I podcast, and occasionally I dabble in illustration. My guest is the incredible PJ Vernon, right, who has volunteered to come on my podcast, For Brave Soul. Anyways, PJ, as I was saying, got anything incriminating you'd like to say, make it good.
Do I have anything incriminating I'd like to say?
I mean, we're live, right? So I mean, we're on. We're visual. People can watch you. People can hear you. So I mean, this is where you get to bring out all the really good stuff. I think, right? I mean, for entertainment purposes and stuff.
Like for entertainment purpose. So you won't lie on a jury, like for my behalf.
No.
What I'm hearing. Okay. In that case, I'll think of something in which the statute of limitations has run out. I definitely did set a park on fire as a kid and was involved in a low stakes cover up on the back end. So I think that's what I'll put forward.
If that sounds like you had ambitions as a kid, or at least either that or you were an excellent thug. I'm not sure. Were you the mastermind or were you like the thug?
Yeah, so I think it was a dangerous combination of being like obviously unbridled childhood ambition, certainly, and also incompetence. So a couple of friends and I wanted to shoot off some fireworks, and we didn't have a lighter. So we were like, well, let's just go to the park and like start a fire, and we'll just light all of our fireworks off of that. And the fire that we chose to start was in the middle of a very dry tree patch in Houston, Texas, over a summer. And one of my friends kicked an aerosol easy cheese can into it, and we had our fun. We thought it was put out. We took off and came back to see the whole thing up in flames, with a bunch of very worried parents gathered around it, and they had the fire marshal come to our bus stop the next morning to talk to us about it. And that was the moment where I decided I could clear my name. So as the person who did it, the fire marshal showed up and went through his whole spiel and was like, is there anything any of you has to say about this? And I was like, I have something to say. If any of you knows who started this fire, this dangerous fire, I think you should pipe up now, please. And that was the moment my parents, I found out years later, were like, shit, he did it. That was him. So there you go.
Can't fool your parents.
No, can't. No. But you can fool the fire department and the PTA.
Yeah, you can. You totally can. I'm sure your parents understood your situation. They're like, we're going to let him slide off the law because that's a little, we don't really want to have that conversation ourselves. And they're going to go to you afterwards. Why did you do this? Did they even ask you?
Well, actually they said nothing. And after like about a month of panic every time the phone rang or, the doorbell rang, because I'm like, gig's up. They're coming. I'm done. Stick a fork in me. I actually waited like about, I'd say, an entire decade to just be like driving in the car with my mom one day and then just out of nowhere at a stoplight, turn around and say, remember that fire? It was me. And I got away with it. And she's just like, everyone knows it was you. But good try. So that's the incriminating stuff I'll admit to, because I feel like
that is one of the best stories I've ever heard. It's not the absolute best, but it's definitely top 3. I'll give you top 3, right?
You got to get better stories.
No, it's a great story. I mean, it doesn't beat the Stone Fly. It doesn't also beat an 18-year-old pop singer telling me she stole absolutely everything. She just openly admitted it, right? But it is good. Like, it is a good and decent story. I mean, you have a beginning, a middle, and a narrative, and we now know younger you was a bit of a sociopath, and clever enough to get away with it, but dumb enough to get in shit, which is.
But I I kind of say so I was in middle school. Do you know a single middle schooler that has empathy and isn't a sociopath?
No, and you know what, that's a fair point. I mean, that's actually a fair point. Like we all, well, I kind of had empathy, but I mean, I understand. I mean, we just kind of like. Here's the thing: the kids that had empathy didn't say anything because we get our asses kicked. Like that was just how it would be. We just there like I mean, teachers all would tell you like you should come talk. It's like no, we shouldn't, because it doesn't matter what you do to them now. They're gonna remember you. No one likes a snitch. Like no one likes a snitch, right?
That's true.
Yeah, that's true. Right. So even if there were empathetic and ones with a conscience, we were usually the tiny guys. You guys, right, or we were outnumbered, and that just tended to like So I mean, if the majority of you are sociopaths and any of us have empathy, well, we're probably outnumbered and outgunned.
Okay, before this gets framed as
yeah.
I mean like cognitively like developed, right? So like in middle school, you're like, you don't have an adult brain yet.
No. Let's be fully honest. Like none of us have like a social code fully developed and informed by the time we're in middle school. That usually. I would like to see about high school. It kind of starts to happen a little bit. Probably doesn't fully kick in though until you're in university or college. It starts in high school because your choices start to become a little bit more adult, right? Yeah. And you actually pay consequences a lot more.
The stakes are higher, and they start getting higher in high school for sure.
Yeah, and then once you hit that point, you kind of have to just like openly acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, you probably should just like probably not do the same stupid shit that you got away with when you were a kid, because that probably just got you in trouble, and you probably just should not do that because
don't set parks on fire. Like
don't do that.
I forgot the most sociopath.
No, like my neighborhood, it was drug dealing and car theft. Right. Okay. So that was like I literally, like, my backyard, you hop the fence at one point, was every stolen car in the city of London, Ontario at one point.
That's something to be proud of.
It is. It's just know that like almost none of those cars in the back there were anybody's.
Right? I wear like my hometown as a badge of honor as well. I'm from this tiny town called Florence, South Carolina, which is exactly halfway between New York and Miami on I-95. So it's basically just an important juncture in the drug trafficking business, and also one of the most violent cities its size. At the last time I checked, I think, which was like 2009 or whatever. And I'm like, I'm from there. Oh. And also, the only American city that's ever had an atomic bomb dropped on it.
Which might explain some of the other things that happened there.
Absolutely. I love how you've got no fun. Like, you just accepted that at face value. You were like, oh, okay, that explains a lot.
So here's the thing. See, I have a really simple philosophy, and it sounds like foolish on one hand, but on the other hand, it saves me a lot of grief. I'm going to assume you're telling me the truth until your words or your actions say otherwise. You have to prove to me you're a liar for me to even think you're a liar. So anything you say, I'll go with it. Now, here's the thing, though. This is how I look at it. Lying takes work, right? Lying actually takes work. So my bet is if you can go through a whole thing and lie and pull a fast one on me, good on you. Congratulations. You worked very hard for that. Whereas I haven't worked hard at all. I just took you at face value. I acknowledge your story. And if it's true, cool. The world's a strange and wondrous place. And because I have this mentality, I can see some of the strange and wonder. And if you're full of shit, that's fine too. Doesn't hurt my feelings either way, right? And I didn't have to work hard either way you went with this. So I shrug, and I'm like, I'll accept. It's actually it's a much simpler way of looking at people, because it's just like, if you really want to work that hard to lie to me, you can do it. I'll let you, because again, man, it's, I mean, I if you really want to pull a fast one on me, I guess I'm flattered. You worked hard for me because I'm certainly not working that hard with you. it's like that's how I've always looked at it, because I find it's just simpler to be open and honest and accepting, and it's hard.
It takes work. You have to have follow through and not be tired, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
To do those kinds of things.
And I have to remember all my lies. That's the thing, right? If I want to keep them straight, I have to remember them, right? Whereas now I don't have to remember squat. Now I might contradict myself from time to time, but that's also just the fact that I change too, right? It's just a simpler way to be. Also, I mean, let's be honest, it's small town United States. Every town, every small town or every place I've been always has an element of strange to it on some level. So is it possible you were tested for a Tom bomb? Sure. It's possible you lied to me? Sure. I'm not going to work that hard, though. It's like, I'll just believe you. I'll just assume it. I'll just assume it's true. It's much more interesting if it is, right?
So I feel like I'd hear that and I'd like pop on Wikipedia immediately because I'd be like so excited, and then like I'd feel personally betrayed as like the search queries like started coming up empty, right?
Yeah. Whereas me, it's just like, okay, cool. And you're like, but you're not gonna. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, if you want to have it, great. If you don't, right?
For your listeners, the Mars Bluff incident. They could Google that if they want to hear about the atomic bomb dropped on tiny Florence, South Carolina.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, and there you go. And there you go, right?
I feel like kind of it's a personal challenge now, and I'm just like, I should, like, because I'm like you. I'm like, I'm super lazy. I'm super tired and exhausted all the time. And again, lies take follow through. It's the same reason why when I'm like locked out of my email and they ask for like a 2-step verification, I'm like, well, I guess I don't have email this week. Don't care.
Yeah.
Now I'm like the world's shittiest liar, not because I'm like morally opposed to it, but because I have a really difficult time hiding how I feel. So I'll say one thing and my like demeanor is completely different. Now I'm like, I'm going to try to slip a lie into this podcast and then let's like figure it out if I'm good at it.
And go nuts. Go do it. I mean, hey, you make the whole thing filled with lies. I mean, like we tell stories. There's always a little, I mean, that's the most lie I tell. I'll make something up and write it down.
Yeah,
right?
Make a bunch of lies on MS Word all the time.
Yeah, and I do it with conviction. Which is why it's so believable when I tell a story, right? So it's not that I can't lie. It's why when I say I try not to be a liar, that's why I say when people go, "Do you lie?" I go, "Yes, I'm honest enough to admit I lie." But when it comes to dealing with people, I just try to be as open as I can because it saves me work, it saves me time, it saves me grief. But also, I mean, here's the other thing too. I interview people all the time. If I was lying to people directly all the time, no one would trust me. And the show wouldn't work and I'd have nobody come on.
But it would be fun to try to pick out which statement you made is not true. I actually the interesting relationship that I have with the truth as a queer man, and it's that comes up all the time in my writing and my friends' writing and in my therapy sessions. And when we talk about like how exhausting, right, like lying is, for example, growing up in rural conservative Christian South Carolina as a closeted queer kid, like you lie every day for survival, right? And so it's this interesting. There's this interesting sort of dynamic at play when your formative years are spent, convincing everyone around you that you're someone that you very much are not, and that sort of it's been fun to talk about and think about how that's followed myself and so many people I know into adulthood. Not so much in that all of a sudden we're adults and we're malicious liars because we've done it our whole lives. It's this always being acutely aware of what you say and how it makes other people around you feel, and this compulsion to sort of want to make people feel good and feel to withhold things that might hurt people or might make people feel bad, I guess. Tangent.
I think, so this is what I think it is. So I happen to live in a small town in the United States for a couple of years. It was Snowflake, Arizona, a very heavily Mormon community. So even more, I wouldn't say, I don't know if it's more extreme, but it has a similar kind of extreme that you experienced. And so what I noticed, this is what I noticed living there, was that there was a degree. It's not that you were necessarily, I think, worried about hurting anybody. It's just that because of the nature of how the town was constructed and the fact that it was such an extremely compact way of being, two things I noticed. Everybody tried to fit in whatever expectations were around them. And I think that's what you were doing. Like, there was an expectation that you sort of felt pressured to live up to. So you did, because it was better than the alternative, which would be to explain absolutely everything. It was a town that probably has no real space to actually do this. I had a friend of mine when I was in college out there. He was actually talking about marrying somebody just to hide the fact he was gay, right? And because, again, there was an expectation of being in that town, so he felt compelled to live a lie to cover up who he was. And that's kind of what I felt like. Probably that's what you experienced. Like, you spent your whole life being trapped in this expectation until you walked away from it. And then you go to another place where there's not those expectations anymore, but there's different ones. Maybe ones you can live with better, maybe ones that are a little bit more moderate, but there's still expectations. So you become acclimated to kind of playing into like this box of what is. And because you do that, you just keep doing what you've always done, which is, this is the expectation. I will try to live in this expectation, right? Now, this box might be bigger because it's a bigger city and people give less of a shit, right? But there's still a box, there's still an expectation, and I'm going to fit myself in this expectation somehow, some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. You're always putting on a show, right? And it's because it's for survival in these like formative years. It's but you can't. It's not so easy to separate that from yourself. And so if you've cut your teeth constantly putting on a show to make because it's about, like, exactly like you said, society's expectations, the people around you and their expectations. It's not about you. It's not about your happiness or what would make you fulfilled. It's about other people, and that really does stick with you. And even as an adult now, I struggle if there's something bad happens during the day. My initial inclination is not to go home to my partner Barry and say, this is what happened. It's so horrible. Can you imagine? How can I spin this so he doesn't think, that something is quite as bad as I think it is right now. And that's, it's certainly not the most healthy way to go about things or navigate life. And certainly so many of us are working on it with our therapists and family. But it is the reality, right? It's this instinctual reflex that, like a muscle that you've had to use for so long.
It's not even necessarily even a conscious thing anymore, because what tends to happen, because when you were younger, it was conscious. You were very aware, and like I said, lies are work. When we were talking about this at the very beginning, like it's a work, it's pressure. Oh my God, what if they tell me this? But eventually, what happens is, over time, is it doesn't exactly get easier. You're just used to carrying it, right? Yeah. And you just become very used to carrying it. And what happens there is, what tends to happen there, right, is, again, you just get caught. You just get caught in that expectation of, okay, I can do this, and this is easy. And then one day, maybe it's by yourself, maybe you find something that actually truly makes you happy, that's kind of close to who you actually are, and then you wonder, what the fuck am I doing, right?
Yeah, or you even use that sort of experience, even when you are so like from my perspective, I went to grad school at Pitt Med, and all of a sudden was in a different city that was much more. It was a magical experience, for lack of a better way of describing it, to suddenly all be yourself. But at the same time, I very quickly, started to identify those same kinds of themes, those same sorts of behaviors in the queer community there, especially gay white men like myself, who I would show up to these bars and these clubs and hang out and have think I was having a great time, but really everyone was pretending. They were getting dressed up, pretending that they were rich, or they were had all this expendable income and can have fun, and this is who they always are, and it was very quickly an exhausting sort of thing, and it took a little bit of work on my part to figure out what my community was within the broader umbrella of queer folks, and where I felt comfortable. And what it turns out, I spent, like we just said, my whole life lying about who I was and trying to be something I wasn't. And so I would show up to these, swanky bars, and, I'm a grad student with, hardly any money in my monthly stipend, and I'm like, this isn't me. This is work. It's hard. I'm going to go hang out at, this other club with people who, I used to love, we had a lesbian bar called Cativo that made the best hamburger in the world. And I would go there with friends and not feel like I had to be anything but myself, which was awesome. So just because you come out, right, or for any other viewers who are finding communities or thinking about these sorts of things, just because you are who you are doesn't mean that you're immediately going to find a community within that broader umbrella that gets it, and isn't doing many of the same things that you were doing before.
Well, what happens is, I think this is it. I know nothing about coming out because I'm straight, but the thing
about you know what it's like to feel different, right?
No, absolutely, absolutely. Right? No, and that, like I wanted to preface that before I went in there. It's like, I don't pretend to understand what that feels like, but what I've moved around a lot as a kid. I would go in from city to city to city, so it gave me a very different perspective because I was always the outsider. Wherever I've gone, I've always been the outsider. So because I've gone from city to city to city to city, it's given me a unique perspective on. I had to learn to be comfortable with who I was at a very young age, because I was like, it was myself and my family, and that was the constant. Everything else came and went. So eventually I learned at a very young age that the only expectations I could have were myself. But even in that, and I've noticed this as I've gotten older with my involved in relationships, something I've struggled with. And even though I realize, like, yeah, I want a relationship, I want certain things in my life, there's a filtration process that happens. And I think, and this is a big thing, like, once you realize this thing about yourself, whatever that is, like, wherever you discover, whether you, whether you're straight or gay, or whether you're trans, or whether you suddenly just realize some really profound truth about yourself, whatever that is, the universe has this way now going, okay, let's see what you really learned from this. And you almost have to go through like a filtration process. Okay, is this who I want to be? Is this who I want to be? Is this who I want to be? And it's with choosing your friends, choosing your relationships, and it's a constant thing. And the more you discover about yourself, the more you have to constantly reassess that. Does that make sense, or am I just talking out of my ass?
Oh no, absolutely. It's a filtration or a filter, as you say, but also, the people in your life go through it as well.
Yeah.
And you're right. We all have to sort of, make these decisions of, it might be painful. But as you said, I there's this profoundly important truth that I hold in my heart, and that's the non-negotiable thing. So I'm gonna have to figure out how I'm gonna navigate life, friends, family, in many cases the family you wind up having to choose to accommodate something that I can't change. So it's very much a filtration system, weighing sort of the things you can control and you can change against the things that you can't, and figuring out what, where all that comes out in the wash, which is a whole continuum of different places.
And that's a lifelong journey, because you also, again, we constantly change as well. I've gotten, like, I'm almost 40. I give far less of a shit now than I did 5 years ago. Right. Yeah. I am terrified of what I'm going to be like when I'm 50, because because I barely care now. Like, I really I've hit that point. I don't. I look around, like, okay, I literally, like, this year freelancing has been great. I've learned an awful lot. Right this minute, financially, I have nothing. I feel the opposite. I'm so free. I can go anywhere I want, do anything I want.
Yeah.
I don't have to put up with anything. It's glorious, right? Right.
It is there, because you like, there's this, like, and not to romantic, like, yeah. I mean, there is an element, as someone who, again, has had nothing, and it's like, slept on their shitty mattress that they've had since they were 12 in grad school, and, like, people were, that I was dating or whatever, were like, maybe we won't sleep in your bed.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely true. What you're talking about, in the way that you change and you learn, and I don't know. It's yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to be in this position in 5 years. Don't get me wrong, but the thing about it is, you come to that recognition, like, and this is where your expectations change, right? I think what happens is, once you get to those profound truths, some of them change. You change how you perceive them as you get older a little bit as well, because they sit there a while, right? And you kind of, like, get this, you get comfortable with it, but you actually start to get deeper rooted into it, right? And what I have found personally is, I have given less and less of a shit of what anyone around me says. I give more about kind of what I want, and I have more specific ideas of what that is. And because I have those specific ideas, anything that doesn't fit, I know a lot quicker, and I discard it a lot faster now than I ever did. Like I said, and it's terrifying that I hit this point now, because my dad took him to about 50 or 60 years old to hit this point. My grandmother longer. I've hit this at 40. At 50, oh my God, I don't know what the hell I'm going to be like. I'm going to be like, I don't got time for this shit.
Are you not looking forward to it a little bit, though? Because I feel like, everyone talks about, like, like the change, like, and we get so much literature and awkward talks with parents and teachers and sex ed when we're going through puberty or whatever else. But really, like, up at, at this point in my life, the largest change that's happened, emotionally, psychologically, has been, that sort of transition into adulthood, where you're like, 19 to maybe like 21. And because I just didn't expect that to be such a huge change when I encountered it, now I'm sort of like, hell yeah, what's going to happen when I turn 50? No, I'm not going to give a fuck anymore.
What terrifies me is, this is actually what terrifies me. I might be the guy that's, like, rushing up that escalator, right? Accidentally kills grandma and not know it, right? Because I'm so caught up in my own. That's the only thing that kind of terrifies me.
How would that even happen? Like, logistically, how would you kill a geriatric person running up an escalator?
There's something I read once. It's like you're the kind of guy sometimes gets so, like, and I do. I'm a very passionate dude. I get caught up, like, I get into those modes, and I just go, like, tunnel vision, and I don't always see the forest and the trees. My biggest fear, my only real fear actually about going forward is losing whatever empathy I have. That's actually the only real fear I have, right? On the flip side, no, I'm looking for no, because as I get older, I get more bulletproof, is how I look at it. Because I look at it from the point of view that I'm not going to walk out of this in one piece. That was never the design. I was never designed to walk out of this in one piece. And as I get older and older and more time goes by, I realize, like, really, what do you just want to do, and just do it and not worry about anything else. When I'm 80, I'm jumping out of the plane. I don't give a fuck. I just don't. Right? Yeah, right.
Do you
Sorry.
I was just gonna ask, like, do you think it's really that, like, as you get older, or as you figure out who you are, and the person that you want to be and the life you want to have, like, are you really losing empathy as a part of bulletproofing, or are you actually just bulletproofing yourself against a bunch of folks in your life who have they've been the antagonist?
I think there's a bit of both there, because I think here's the thing. My patience, right? My patience isn't what it like was when it was 20. That's not entirely a bad thing, but it's also not entirely a good thing either. I think it's that sense of you don't have time, because really, when you sit there and think about it, when you look at wealth, what wealth actually is, one of the big keys is time, right? Time is the absolute, like, one of the biggest commodities we have. Energy is another one, right? But there's time, our energy, our effort, right? And whatever wealth we have. So the thing about that is, right, you don't want to waste it. And I think as you get older, that becomes a more and more precious thing, because you realize you have less of it. I'm at that point where I still might have more in front of me than behind me, but that's debatable, right? At this point, when I get another 10 years, it's not going to be debatable anymore. It's going to be more behind me than in front of me. Now, it's still a lot ahead of me, but how much you can say, right? So, right. So I think the big thing, and I've seen this with many of old person, right? Elderly people, I should say, is they don't have patience. And I understand. And again, I understand that a little bit, because again, they recognize they don't have a lot of time. They don't want to deal with any bullshit. And there is a bit of, like, bulletproofing yourself, but some of that is also, you're being just an impatient. You're being an impatient ass. Wait a second. Things still happen on in their own time.
So, I feel like people should accommodate your impatience.
Somewhat. I mean, no.
We're grounded in that.
Yeah, somewhat. But I mean, that again, it's acknowledging you're never going to be perfect, and at that, right, and that's just one of those things where I just aware of going forward is that my patience is probably going to go probably a little more than it should. And that's kind of where I'm worried about, like, losing some empathy here and there. That all said, no, you're right. Like, there is, as you get older, you worry far less about what expectations actually are, because you recognize that it doesn't matter. Like, a lot of most of this world that we have around us is a fiction. Like, if you talk about the great lie is the world. And I'm not talking like the physical planet. I'm talking like the world as we see it. That's the big lie. And all these expectations come from how we perceive this world. So, I mean, eventually you're just going to stop caring. You're going to just realize, like, it doesn't really matter what this is. What matters is I'm here to do whatever my thing is, whatever that is. And I'm going to do it because I'm going to do it. And if you don't like it, fuck it.
Yeah, you're not my jam. You're not my thing. And I'm not yours. And that's okay. There's billions of people on the planet.
Exactly. You're getting a hoot out of this, aren't you?
Having a good time. I'm on Twitch for the first time.
Yes, it is. This is Twitch. Well, this is Twitch and Facebook Live at the same time. And here, yeah, Twitch is a social community. Like I said, I think you'd have a blast with that. I think, my friend, because I think you'd enjoy interacting with various people, just asking questions. Because, to your credit, I mean, you've done very well for yourself in the publishing game. Congratulations!
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I really appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it kind of like this. None of us, we all kind of hope for a break. We all hope for, like, that big break. But the reality of the situation is, I honestly feel this way. Anyone that gets it, you should be happy for them. It's so hard, right? It's so hard. It's one of those things when you see a great thing, right? It's somebody else. I have no idea, like, everything you've been through. I don't. Like, I don't know you that well. But I know that, like, you had to work hard to get to where you're at. I know you had to work hard to get to kind of where you're going. And and you got to work hard to stay there. It's not an easy thing. It's awesome you got there. It's hard to stay there. So why wouldn't I root for you? Because honestly, the fact that you're there gives people like me hope. If you can do it, so can I, right? But in the meantime, I hope you go on the craziest ride you can, because why not? You're there. Enjoy it.
Well, I appreciate that. And I also hope I go on the craziest ride ever. And I hope the same thing for you. I think about this a lot, just as I'm sure you do, as a member of both the Calgarian writing community, but also, there's so many niches in writing, like writing communities, whether it's, on social media, the conference circuit, all the above. And one of the biggest things I remember, not all that long ago, there was shitty writing advice going around on Twitter because some person chimed in with a hot take about how, writing's competitive, or, getting to sort of this idea of are you happy for the people around you when they succeed? And, that was when I saw that tweet, that was the first time I even considered it, because it was so instinctual just to be fuck yes, I'm so happy. Number one, if if you go on and are, a New York Times bestselling author with 18, an 18 book deal and a Las Vegas residency and a movie, well then, I'm going to be hey, remember me? I was on your podcast, and so it behooves us to be so excited for our friends and our colleagues who get wild, are successful in whatever metric they determine success it means to them. But also it's the farthest thing from a competitive gig, because if we both wrote, the same exact book, essentially just in our different voices in the same, genre, if we're both writing vampires, right? And someone reads your book and is man, I love Josh's vampire book. It's a bestseller. And I chances are you probably don't have the ability to write a new one as fast as they can read them. So they're just going to, those readers are going to be well, who else writes stuff like that? And you can be my buddy PJ, he writes vampires that are kind of like mine. And they'll read my stuff while they wait. And so it really is, a rising tides kind of thing. And there's very few industries. And I say that as someone who's participated in a lot of very competitive industries. I worked for the Defense Department as an immunologist. And I just feel this one is very special in that it truly is it is not a competitive thing. And it is something where, you should be happy for folks, and it behooves you to for your own career. And nothing beats seeing someone else's good news. It to this day, it makes my day every single time I get on Twitter and see that.
Well, I've said this on this podcast many times. It's what we offer. If we really really honestly talk about the technical aspect of writing, every story's been told, right? If you really get right down to it, they've all been told.
No new ideas.
Yes. However, there is one thing new in it, and that's you. There's only one PJ Vernon. There's only one, thank God, of me. Right? I'm sure I'm sure Guy, when he made that, was and we're never doing that again. But that's okay, right? Right. But the thing about that is, right? We all experience life differently. We all go through different experiences at different times. There's no right or wrong to it. And the things we care about and our choices make us who we are. I couldn't tell you a story that you don't like you could. It's impossible. I don't see the world the way you do. And vice versa. Now, again, you might technically be a better writer than me. That's cool, right? I mean, I'm just saying, right? Craft is important, right? But when you get right down to it, right, it's our voices that sell. It's not what we write. Listen, I wrote a story about a jar of dirt because I was bored, just to see if I could, right? And I did. I made the dumbest guy I could with a jar of magical dirt and see what he could do with it. And it was just me having a good time. It really just was me horsing around. And the only reason the story worked was because I told it, right? That's it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, right? Man finds treasure, and squanders it, right? And that's the thing, right? Like it's been done.
Yeah, it's your fingerprint. Your voice is your fingerprint. No one can replicate it. We've all heard, like Star Wars: A New Hope. If you tell Star Wars: A New Hope, it's no one's ever heard of Star Wars: A New Hope told by you. No one's ever heard Star Wars: A New Hope in my voice either. It's brand new.
Yeah.
And the world sort of does. I mean, these all belong on shelves and to be available. All of these voices, right? It's talent so learnable, just like you were hinting at. We work on our craft and we practice and we write and do all the things, but it's really us that sells it. I would read if Gillian Flynn wrote the back cover of a cereal box, I would buy it.
That's right. The greatest Lucky Charms story you never knew was possible, right?
The most terrifying Lucky Charms.
Yes.
Gothic.
You never look at those rainbows the same way again. Oh God, no. But with that all said, I gotta ask this because we all have it. So, what was the book that made you want to be a writer?
Yeah.
What?
I would say, it's a good question. I actually have a book that made me want to write in the genre that I could thrive in. So I've always written. I've always been a voracious reader. And I kind of had to experiment my way to figure out, kind of like you're talking about, like, I'm like, it's just my jar of dirt, and that's my story. So I thought I was going to write the next Game of Thrones. So it was like, but it was going to be like Roman inspired. And it's the shittiest book in the world. It's literally in the closet right over there. No one will ever see it. But I wrote that, and I wrote another manuscript that was like a near future dystopian thing. And I started to get closer and closer to thrillers and suspense with every project that I worked on. So like this high fantasy story, I didn't give a shit about, these casts of thousands and battles and geopolitics and all the things that even as a fantasy reader myself, at times I want and expect from that genre. I wasn't delivering on. And yet I was really interested in the relationships, the toxicity, the dynamics, how people were lying and betraying one another and up to no good at a very granular level. And so I was actually reading The Girl on the Train in the middle of writing this like speculative fiction story that I was super proud of. And as I was reading it, I was just like, I had this moment where I was like, oh, I can just tell the story I want to tell without worrying about all of this world building and things that really aren't my thing. I can just use Facebook and Twitter as plot vehicles. And so that was, it sounds cliche, but that was a suspense book that really pushed me over the edge when it comes to being able to, realize like this is what I can do well. That, and, just wandering around in a bookstore one day and carrying around in my head that like Stephen King or bust. Like you've got to be, like authors are rich, they're famous, they live in New York, they have all of these like fabulous, lives, and it's just so unattainable. Lightning has to strike you, and of course, luck plays such a huge role in it. And I don't want to discount that at all. But at the same time, I walked into a bookstore and I was like, there's thousands of people here, thousands of books. I'd recognize none of them in the airport. Like maybe I can do this too, if they can.
Well, yeah. I mean, in one sense, it's easier today than it ever was. In another sense, it's harder because now it's like I was watching something that I was reading today about. There's an agent kind of struggling with like people trying to pressure and reading their stuff because of their own like little deals with these small presses or vanity presses or whatever. Publishing has gotten very, very niche. I think it's been interesting to watch the evolution of publishing in the last couple of years because it's interesting because in one sense I think what's happened with traditional publishing in particular is it has become it's now a very, 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 I'm not going to say it's a terrible thing. It's a structured thing. If it's a very particular, like it protects formulae, that they are comfortable with, and they sell those formulae very, very specific, no matter what the genre is. Like, and they find people that tell those stories very well, and that can fit and can do the things they believe that they can do well, and that's cool. Then there's all these other like niche markets that aren't hit anymore, that a lot of indie authors are hitting, right? Then there's also like crowdfunding, which is another part of the publishing industry. I still think from an like you see it with comics a lot right now, but I do think there's a lot of mining there for authors as well. And there are authors even right now. That's all they do. They just do crowdfunding, and all three paths are viable ways to make a living.
Yeah, and all three are viable ways to fail too. For anyone who thinks that they'll just like get a book deal with Big Five and they're set. There's wildly successful titles everywhere, thank God, in all of these different paths and streams. And I, naively, when I kind of, as an observer look at this, the one thing that sort of seems to be the common thread between those successes is an appreciation for the kind of thing you're getting into and the skill set it needs. Because, when we look at that's a small business, that's entrepreneurial. I mean, writing for other people is entrepreneurial regardless, but that's really, you are a small business owner. And the folks that have that skill set, we probably both know so many, even just here in Calgary, and who do it so well. And it's because they have that mindset, as opposed to folks who maybe get rejected by one agent or one publishing house and say, well, whatever, it's impossible, I'll self-publish that. Like, that's not the right reason to get into it, nor is it the right reason to get into pursuing a tradition. You just think, that if Penguin buys your book, you're rich now.
Yeah. I'm going to turn the light on real quick, and I'll be right back, because I actually have an interesting thought here. I'll see what you think about it.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, just
no worries.
It's just sun's just going down here, so just like so it's changing the light. And I don't want to be the creepy guy in the basement. I want to be visible to the audience here, right? So here's the thing, right? So this was an interesting thing for me this year. Like last year when the pandemic hit, I have reach because of my podcast, because I've talked to so many different people and stuff, and I have listeners like scaringly around the world. People like listen to what I say. Holy shit, right? But it puts me in a very interesting spot with publishing, right? Because it's like I could go with a smaller publisher, and there are a few I would go with. But at this point for me, there's the business end of what do you offer me that I can't get myself, right? And that's not just like even small house. It's like even the bigger houses. That's the approach I have to have now, right? Because I've grown as a voice big enough that I can do that. So I'm probably, for me, it's going to be probably some kind of hybrid model, because I'm going to be publishing things on my own because I like experimenting. I'm doing all kinds of crazy experimental stuff, and I'm happy as a clam doing that stuff. I can also do some stuff that's a little bit more formulaic. Maybe it's not quite the right word, but a little bit more traditional stuff. And that stuff I might shop around.
You're not pushing your boundaries. Like you've got writing that you push your boundaries, and writing that you don't push it quite as far.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, right? So that's who I am. I like experimenting, so I need that. If I don't, I'd go nuts. I'm already a little crazy, but that's beside the point.
You're a writer. That's
but
why we're good at it.
Yeah, but right, that's where I am. So for me, I'm gonna have to come up with like a hybrid model. And I've been still kind of working on that. I'm working on the I'm coming at it from the independent point of view, because the way I look, I think the other thing too, I this is just my belief going forward. I do think all of us, doesn't matter, we all, I think as writers at this point, strictly on a business level, are going to have to dip our toes into a bunch of these different things as time goes on, because the world's constantly changing. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I am extremely happy that you are where you're at, but there might come a point down the road, it's like, you know what? I'm going to have to try some things on my own, right? And kind of just see how they go and how they do it, because, and it actually might benefit your publishers too. Because what'll happen is like you've done some things on your own. You can reinvent yourself a little bit, and then you can go back and offer like almost like your voice evolves. It's almost like that band that makes that concept album. You go out and do that concept album, and you come back and you do your the stuff you did before bigger and better, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's sort of the thing, right? Like no matter what you're doing, you're always going to run into circumstances that you didn't anticipate you'd have to tackle or you'd have to learn or figure out, and that's in the vacuum of everything that's going on now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, from the like, using my own experience, you're not gonna sign a book deal and all of a sudden everything's done for you. Like my debut was with a New York press, which was fabulous, and it did really well. But it was a smaller New York press, a smaller print run, no publicity budget whatsoever for that book, and so I wound up with a traditional book deal, figuring out how the hell I'm supposed to pitch myself to media for pieces and appearances and press hits and all those kinds of things, and to wildly varying success. But those are things that people probably think, oh, I signed a book deal. I don't need to learn what a trade review is. I don't need to learn why there's such a large profit representation in this particular kind of format, audio versus whatever, like all of those sorts of things. But if it's your business, it'd be a boring business if you knew everything when you started it.
I actually, here's the other thing. Like talking about the older you get, I know less and less every day, and I realize that it's like sometimes I literally will go on. I'm like, what am I doing here? I don't know. Like,
well, you don't know less every day. You know less about the shit you don't care about every day.
Yeah.
And you know more about the shit that you do care about, because that's where you divert your time because you value your time more.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, every once in a while, you get like you get yourself in a situation, and you're like, what am I doing here? Right? Because it's like this seemed like such a good idea at the time. But really, what am I doing in this moment? Right? Like,
I've got ADHD. Like, I say yes to fucking everything, like as like my default, and then very quickly I'm like,
oh shit,
I made a mistake. I get it, and I think everyone does. I think everyone in this industry does, where we're not guaranteed anything, right? It's not medical school where you just show up and if you do everything right, not saying it's not hard, that you get a degree and a ticket to ride. This is, you show up because you love it. And everyone's journey looks so different.
Yeah, and I think that's the best part about it too. So I'm going to ask a fun question. If you can't answer, I totally understand it. I just actually we'll ask it this way. It's a safer way to ask it this way. You've got a few books out now, and you've definitely gotten yourself in some decent sized houses. Are you looking at taking your media into other places like movies or television or anything like that? And have you tried that? And if you have, how's it gone? If you can't talk, this is one of those things. Again, if you can't talk about it, I totally understand.
Yeah. No, and I'm always cognizant of, as someone who to authors, be real and talk candidly about stuff, because so many folks, and myself included, are uncomfortable sometimes talking about things that in that way. I would say I have fabulous film and TV representation through Sugar 23, which is a production company that shops options. My film agent was originally with UTA, and so I've been fortunate enough to have had conversations in that space, which I can't really talk about specifically.
No,
but I'd love to answer any questions about process or
no. So I'm gonna add this. There's this thing called negotiating leverage and NDA. That's why he cannot say anything more than this, ladies and gentlemen, because he might have already made an agreement. And if he has made an agreement, he can't talk about it until it's revealed at whatever time it's revealed, and then maybe he can talk about it. Or let's say I talk to him and say, what would you love to do with your stuff? And he goes, ooh, like this would be nice. Well, again, that's a leverage thing. Can't do that either. So,
but at the same time, like, you know, I just want to reiterate, you know, I love movies and I love TV and all that kind of stuff. But what I love are books, and that's what I do. And anything else is just, you know.
No. The only reason I even brought this up, honestly, and this is something I just want to be. I think that's a very cognizant thing about like authors. We're talking about strictly on the business end here. One of the things we don't do enough is consider how we resell our properties once we're done. And that's why I brought this up, because honestly, one of the things that can keep income coming in long after is the fact that this is what publishers do all the time. They resell stuff to different publishing houses for rights all over the world, and vice versa. And it gets you more money too, because you get them sold here. That's cool. That's more checks that come down the line. I just want to just pay attention to the fact that it never stops, no matter where you're at in the journey, right? Yes, yeah. That's all I'm doing here. Beyond that, I'm being hyper respectful because I do understand.
Well, but I'll give a different example that speaks to your point exactly.
Yeah,
because you're so right. You know, in at least traditional publishing, so self-publishing is you know a totally different beast. There's a reason why folks keep 85 or whatever the percentage is now of every book that's all, because you earned it. But I you know, even so, my debut, for example, it came out in 2018. You know, small print run, did really well, like had fabulous trade reviews and all these sorts of, but it wasn't at that point in 2018 some sort of like breakout thing. Right. And so you think, okay, well, that was great. That was fabulous. That was such a great experience. Let's move on to the next project and let's keep building this career. And you never know. Audible Plus, the new subscription service that Audible launched this past, I believe, end of August, like late August, September. So, you know, you've got Audible where you buy your audiobooks and we all listen to them and those kinds of things. But there's this like, kind of like the new Netflix of Audible, right? You pay, I think, like $7-10 a month to get access to all these different, and somehow my debut was included among those, and it shot to the number one title over the summer, and even like as recently as last week was still number 4, just because it happened to be in the right place at the right time, that I was completely out of my control, could have never predicted it. You know, thought I was like, oh, that was a great run. We had a great time with it. And then all of a sudden I'm getting like Google alerts and I'm in all of these things. And, you know, it goes to this point of just like, you're never done. And there's all considering things you know, subsidiary rights or opportunities to continue getting compensated for your work in the future is so important, because you never know what's going to happen that you just have no control over. I had no idea that was going to happen.
So we'll go this way. I think to dovetail a little bit, but also just to add this, like I think the thing is, and this is something I recognize this, what success, you cannot control when success comes, right? If it comes, all you can really do is prepare yourself as best you can should that moment arrive, because when and if that moment does come, there are chances to go to some really neat places. But the readier you are, the more places you can go.
And I would even say, like, that is absolutely correct. So, like, talent's learnable, your voice is irreplaceable, it only belongs to you, but also, like, luck matters and being in the right place at the right time. So part of, like, preparing for that moment and knowing, you know, if you want something, and from my own experience, a traditional book publishing deal is important to me. If that's what I want, then I appreciate that luck matters and being at the right place at the right time matters. So I'm going to make sure that I'm in every single place I can possibly think of at every single time I can possibly think of. And that way I'm just increasing the chances that lightning strikes me. It's like one of those instances, I think of like lightning striking, and it's like, it's instead of like hiding or going inside, I'm like climbing with like metal, as much metal as I can get. Like here, I'm ready.
You're Ben Franklin praying a kite in a thunderstorm. It's like, come on.
But instead of like a single key, it's like every metal thing you own. Because you're like, right. Please.
Yeah, but I mean that like I said, no one can anticipate when those things happen. All you can do is, like, when it comes, for me, like, I got, like, when the year I was nominated for the Aurora, I actually asked myself, because that was when I had like a little bit of imposter syndrome. I can only imagine what I'll be like if and when I do go for places in Hollywood.
I've never been nominated for an Aurora.
I know.
I'd have imposter syndrome as well.
Yeah, right. I didn't expect it at all, right? So, like, the legitimate question I asked myself, and then I've kept this in my head going forward: how did I get here? What can I do to stay here, right? Even if I don't win it again, I've been a finalist 3 times. That's a very cool honor to have. And so, how did I get here? What did I do to get here? What can keep me from coming back?
Yeah.
And that's just an honest gut check, right? Because because we can always get better. We can always try new things, do new things, and experiment. Like this, for me, is an experiment. I took the podcast to a visual level, and I've had the opportunity to have great guests like yourself. And like I said, having a wonderful conversation that started with expectations, and and now we're talking about like you be like your journey to success and a little bit of the little successes I've had along the way too. And the fact is, like, the key was, I mean, yeah, you couldn't make it happen, but you were smart enough when the moment came to take advantage of it, and you were in a position you could take advantage of it. And I mean, and you're doing what everybody does in those positions. You're looking to maximize your time here because, again, you don't know when. I mean, it can go too. It can come and it can go, and you want to make sure, like, you do everything you can to keep it for as long as you can. So, I mean, you've done everything you want to do in this space. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say, like, to do a podcast, to commit to that regularly, to move it, on video. I was emailing you earlier today. I'm like, is this on camera? If it's on camera, I have to figure out something different than if it's not, sort of a thing. Because we all stress out about these things. But the fact that you're like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it, experiment, as you have done repeatedly. And it's like, it's that fear. It's easy to say, but it's that fearlessness that really all of a sudden puts people in a position where you're like, oh, I actually am really good at this thing that I thought was so hard to do until I just tried. And you tried. And that's like, that is incredible and something so worth celebrating, because most people don't. People always, a billion people want to run a podcast, a billion people want to write a book or a comic or whatever, and yet how many actually see it through to the end? And just seeing something through the end, whether that's my own shitty first draft or like whatever, the fact that you can do that already separates you from so many other people who love to talk about shit, and yet you're always like, but did you finish? And it doesn't have to be great. You'll fix it later. But did you finish? Did you do that podcast? Did you film that thing? Did you book that guest? Did you write that book?
So I have 8 rules to success. You know what the very first rule is? It sounds so simple, but so few people do it. Show up.
Yeah, show up.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds dumb. But at like 35, I figured out why my teachers gave 10% for the attendance mark. I understood it for the first time. Why did you do that? It was so easy. Well, then why didn't you do it?
And also just like follow instructions. Like I say this all the time, and I'm always like laughing, like with my agent and like as a pitch wars mentor who like goes through, queries and those kinds of things in that contest. Like I'm always, people love to say like, oh, a literary agent sees 100 emails a day. Of course, I'm never going to how am I going to shine? And I'm like, y'all, a literary agent sees 100 emails a day, and like 90 of them are all like people who don't follow instructions, who are like, hi, here's my book. It's the Da Vinci Code meets Harry Potter meets the Bible, and it's going to be $1 billion blockbuster, so rep me. And like, you're not competing with that crowd. 10 of those 100 emails followed instructions and created a query letter that just talked about character conflict stakes. Hope you love it. Would love to hear more. And so you're really just competing with people, like you said, who follow instructions and just go for it
and show up
and put themselves out there.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's such a simple thing, but it's amazing, and that's what beats most people. And honestly, that's honestly what does it. It's not talent, because Lord knows there's more talented people than me. Right?
Oh God!
Yeah. Lord knows.
It's you have to read a book that's better written than mine, or worse written than mine, I should say.
Oh yeah, I'll challenge you. I'll tell you. You know. So at God, the name of the con. Oh man, this is gonna drive me nuts. Sandra. God, my brain has completely fried. Vancouver has a Creative Inc. Okay, so the first night, last time I was there, they had everybody come up and read their really, really terrible first drafts. So it was like for first story ever written. It's amazing to watch. So I've been looking. I can't find it. It's too bad. So my very first story, I still remember this. It was like these dolphins saving the world. It's actually a really cool idea. But I made this is the mistake I made, because you ever watch those old oceanography thing and you hear a dolphin speak? For whatever reason, my 8-year-old brain said, "Hey, listen, what does the dolphins always do? You talk like they sound." It seemed like a good idea in the head. When we wrote it out, it was a really poor execution choice. Right? It was a really, really poor execution choice, because when I went to read it, it's like, I don't know what they're saying here. And that
I'm laughing because I did almost the exact same thing.
And you think it's a good idea because it's like, hey, no one's ever done that, and then you put it down and you're like, no one's ever done that. This is why.
That like Game of Thrones I was writing.
Yeah.
I was so excited about. Like, it opens like with the point of view of a falcon flying over the land I created, because I was like, readers will need to know what's going on in the world. So we'll just be in the mindset of a falcon as it flies over mountains and ocean. And so and I read that in my classes as like, what I'm trying to say, like, you can write shitty, like no one's looking, write your shitty first draft. You can fix it on the back end. Here's mine.
Yeah, it's
hard to write from the POV of an animal.
Yeah, it really is. High five for bad ideas. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
At least you chose one that's like one of the most intelligent. I mean, like, no hate against falcons. They are incredible. Love them. But at least you chose a dolphin.
Yeah, no, it's
just like, this bird's exciting.
Well, no, it seemed great in theory, except like, so what I was going to do if I found the draft, so you remember those really terrible kung fu movies with terrible English translations? That's what I was going to do when I read it. I would just do like the dolphin, get the dolphin echo, and have people just do random kung fu translations. I don't know what I said here, so have fun, right? If I did such a terrible job, at the very least, people can interact with it and make up their own story. And I'll just keep reading from whatever they say. It's like, okay, well, it made more sense than what I did. So I mean, right? But I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's not about getting it all right the first time. It's just about it's really about doing it. We get caught up with this like sense of perfection, and honestly, it doesn't exist. It's not real.
It exists in your anxiety dreams and influence, but that's it.
It's not real. Well, it's so I had a so if you look at like sea salt from like a microscopic level, right? You have to see these like all these flaws in the salt, like these little black specks and stuff like that. They're misshapen, different stuff. Now that stuff, those little flaws actually works in our bodies better than the iodized salt that looks absolutely perfect, because it actually absorbs better than the iodized salt does. So sometimes the flaws are, and going back to like voice, the fact that our voice is the way it is, those flaws we have actually kind of enhance the way we tell the story. So, I mean, if it was perfect, we wouldn't be able to tell it this way. And that's why your editors drink a little bit too sometimes, because it's like, what the did you do here, right? But and you know, and there might be like, why did you do that? And sometimes you read it and you're like, I don't know, I had no idea.
The editors got it. It's like I always dread like getting to the copy editor stage, because those are folks with such a skill set that it's so beyond mine. They're like, there were no stop signs in 1742. There's a stop sign here. Or like, you can't serve wine from 1996 because a volcanic eruption happened in Italy that year, and the grapes were completely ruined. But that's the thing I worry about the most, because they'll, you know, I'm like, this was a cracker jack box of a house. It's just a turn of phrase. And they're like, well, does it really look like a cracker jack box? Because those are very tall and shallow, and houses are generally not, unless you're meaning X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, is that my voice, or did I F it up? I have no idea. So that's the one where I'm always like,
and sometimes you're like, I'll live with it, and sometimes you're like, you know what, you're right. You're just right.
Yeah.
They're like, you know, I'm not even gonna argue. So my very first, I did this way back in Dave's essay, and I looked at the copy as it was all read. Now, a couple of those changes, I looked at them. I looked at what I did. I looked at the changes, and I looked. It's like, ain't that different, really? But they're paying me. Shrug. Okay, whatever. Right? Sometimes that's it. Like, some battles aren't worth fighting. Some are, but some.
And I always look at like with admiration at authors who are just so confident, and they're just like, stet. Like, don't need that. That's my voice. Don't keep that. You're wrong, the copy editor or what have you. And I'm always just like, I don't have that confidence. I feel like everything I did, like we were talking about earlier, where, you know, we're like, I don't have the follow through, and I'm tired. I'm like, I probably just didn't know the right word or grammar.
I don't fight those battles, because they probably are right there. Right. It's more like, okay, it's more like, does what they suggest change the tone of the story? Like what does the story need? Right?
Yeah.
Those battles I will fight a little bit, right? Or at the very least, we'll have a back and forth. Okay, I don't think this works, because I'm going for this. Sometimes they're like, no, it really works. See, like this. Oh, I'm silly. Sometimes though it's like, no, okay, what if we do this? Right? What if we do this? And if that's the case, right? Like, there's like, I think editors don't get mad if you're willing to work with them. They get mad when you fight them on everything, because now it's like, you're not working with me. Why am I here?
Well, absolutely, and that's why it's so, like, you know, you never take for granted like the trust that you have in a relationship with anyone, whether it's, you know, from the agent to the editor to the copy editor and proofreader and production team or market, like anything, because is when you start from a place of, we all want this project to be the best it can be and be as successful as it possibly can be, then you're totally liberated to have any kind of conversation about what could potentially improve it, or spitball or brainstorm, and not everything resonates or what have you. But that's something that, it's so vital, and not taken for granted. I've not had an experience where I didn't trust, the person giving feedback.
It's not. It's, if you have trust issues with your editor, this relationship's doomed. One way or the other, is this relationship's doomed. Either the editor will grow impatient and probably at that point just say, kill you, or what is more likely to happen is, again, it's just a professional thing. If you're not willing to work with the people that are going to bat for you, sooner or later they're gonna let you go,
and realize you've got blind spots. Like we were joking about shitty first drafts. It's like, it doesn't matter where you are on whatever path, wherever, what your artistic medium is. Like, we just don't produce gold. the second we create it. And so you're absolutely right. These are folks who you don't just trust them, to improve the piece and have your best interests at heart, but they're the ones who spot those. Better the editor says, I'm sorry, your tension just plummeted at chapter 4 and I would have put the book down, then God forbid a reader say that.
Yeah.
These are people, they're saying things that, we all need to hear in different ways.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, because readers are more brutal than editors are, actually.
As they should be.
Yes. But they are, right? And the right, and when they're right. Like sometimes you'll look at a comment, you're like, what are you talking about? Then you actually read it. Damn it. Right. And that's just the way it is, right? I mean, reality, and again, I know this, like, I'm on my second novel. This will be my 6th book, and right? Yeah. I did 3 poetry books. I accidentally wrote it, accidentally got it published. Right, there's
something you don't hear every day.
Yeah, and then I did. Colleen Anderson requested I do a Lewis Carroll themed epic poem like I did with the first 3. So I started another series kind of by accident, Alice in Wonderland and Greek mythology as a mashup, Alice's Pandora. It works incredibly well, actually. Right. So I'm doing that. That's one thing I'm doing. Like, these are things I'm doing independently, right? Like, it's me being as experimental as I can because I can do it. Like, this is kind of something I've done. I've done 1 novel, and I'm happy with it. That it's my first. It's better. It's good, but I can do better. And my next release is going to be so much better, right? Because I learned. And that's the thing too, like it's to such a degree that when I get to do the sequel to that first novel at some point, I might rewrite that novel a little bit once I'm a little more comfortable with what I've learned, because you always can grow. Right? I think this is the one advantage self-publishing has over traditional publishing, and that's this: you can't really rewrite your early books. I mean, you might be able to one day, because you might become the next Stephen King, and you might decide that, you know what, that Dark Tower series or whatever your equivalent will be, I want to rewrite that, and you'll have the pull to do it. But for the most part, like, once you've written something traditionally, it's set in stone. You can't go back. Self-publishing has the luxury of, I can rewrite this at some point down the road. I think there's a window with that. Like, I know, like, when I get to the second, like, I have to get to the sequel to that book this year or next year, or that window will close, because I won't be the same person at that point. But the thing is, right, that's the advantage. These are things I'm self-publishing. These are like me working on my craft and getting better, and I can do that in that stage. Whereas in a traditional stage, although there's way more people to help me out, once it's out, it's out.
Well, and way more people means, way more people who have a stake in what you're doing as is when something is acquired. And
absolutely.
You're absolutely right. Like, when it comes to self-publishing, from everything that I understand, you're in control. And when you sell, I mean, when a lot of folks who self-publish talk about selling a book, they're talking about, like, I sold a book to a reader. I sold X. This is what it means to me to sell a book. And in many occasions with traditional publishing, like, what it means to sell a book is I've sold it to an organization that I've trusted, has my vision and my voice, at heart, and the success of those things, and they own it now. And that there is an extraordinary degree of control that you relinquish. If folks want to retitle something, I have no idea. The cover of any book is an artist's interpretation, of that story. And I've been extraordinarily lucky in loving all those covers that come out, and really finding joy in seeing a new lens, the story being applied through a new lens of another creative. But again, it's something that from the get-go, I'm like, I'm making this trade-off. I don't need to control this because it's not as important to me as, these other items, which is something everyone has to make on their own. But it gets down to this point of control and what's important to you, you know?
And the other thing too is like what you're mentioning is like they have a stake there because they're not just selling to bookstores; they're selling to. We mentioned this briefly to other mediums as well, right?
Yeah.
So let's look, presentation, everything about it. They are making it's a lot of people making these decisions, and once these decisions are made, and you do have some say in it because I want you to do more books. I mean that's part of it. But also, I mean, it is your baby. They're not going to say we shouldn't because it's your it's your voice that carries this, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing: like you're going to go back 5-10 years from now, like way better writer. You're going to look at that guy. And you're going to be like, I needed you to get to where I am now, and you're grateful for that. But if there's anything that rankles in those early books, you're going to be like, well, shit.
And that's something I've discovered and am in the process of discovering that I just have to accept. Like there are certain things that I have to accept. I have to accept that I'll never be, that author who pops on a podcast or an interview or whatever else and is insightful and succinct and not rambling and not just like, I'm so happy to be here. You know what I mean? Like I'll always I'll never be, that masterpiece theater person that I see it. I'm like, I wish I was like that. That seems classy and sophisticated. Like that will never be me, and I need to be okay with it. And another thing I have to be okay with is I will never be selling my best writing at any point to the public because of the length of time it takes to bring something to market. So I will always, every book I come out with is going to be like the best thing I could have put together at that point in my life. That's the best story I could have told in the best way I could have possibly told it. Things I can control, but I'll always be because we're talking about like a 1 to 2 year lag or more between each of these projects, and so you'll always look back at a finished product and flip pages and think, I would have written that a little bit differently. There's more words in that sentence than there should have been, or what have you, and I'm okay with that. And I only stress that point because it was something that gave me a lot of anxiety that I thought a lot about, and I've sort of accepted it at this point.
So you mentioned fantasy. You were trying fantasy when you started. Did you ever read Terry Pratchett?
I have one. I feel like it's probably somewhere. Oh, this is my one. The only book.
Okay.
That I've ever read from Terry Pratchett, but I am familiar with the premise of the work, like the world and those sorts of things. But this is the only.
I'm going to make a recommendation for you. I think this will actually put your mind, I think, hopefully even more at ease than what it is. He actually rewrote one of his books that he wrote when he was 12, and it's called The Carpet People. It's not quite the same book he normally writes, but I loved my favorite thing in that whole book. It's a good story, but my favorite thing is the intro. He goes, here's the thing. I had to respect one other author besides myself when I wrote this, and that's 12-year-old Terry Pratchett. Because 12-year-old Terry Pratchett wrote his heart out, and I can't duplicate that. I'm a better writer than he was, technically. But that enthusiasm, that passion, that what made that story click, that's all him. That's not me. All I'm trying to do now is polish this vision.
Yeah.
That's right? Yeah. And that's the thing. Like I remember, like I'm drawing now, right? If you ever go on my Facebook feed, you'll see my drink and draws because this is a visual podcast now. I'll draw with some
drink and draws.
Yes, I do.
I love that. That's so alliterative. And well, so because
here I'll show you. Like comfort zone thing. I've been teaching myself how to draw. So my first attempt at Ganondorf.
Oh, that's sharp.
Yeah. So let's go. Here, I'll show you another one here. another fun one here.
I'm just gonna offer hot takes and critiques on this. Like I can draw any damn thing. Ooh.
Obnoxious boots link. That's obnoxious boots link. Those
yeah,
boots.
but like there's like I feel like there's something to that to unpack. Like there's a subtext.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? I'm having fun. Yeah, no. Let me explain this. Like down the road, I'm going to get better. Like if I can show you my early step, and some of that stuff makes me cringe even now because I've gotten so much better than when I started. But I also realized I couldn't duplicate that enthusiasm.
No,
I can't do it. I cannot do it. That person who drew that, I can have that sense of fun, but now I'm burdened with the knowledge that I know more shit, right? A little bit more than when I started. And because of that, now even though like I've actually sold a couple pieces this year too, which is actually kind of cool. So
that's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah, I literally started drawing 4 months ago. This is just something I did to get out of my comfort zone. But also, like illustrators are awesome people, but they speak visually, right? So give them a visual platform. You can have some really cool, like where they can just chill. It's fun, right? So that's why. So I do drink and draws every Friday. My guest is another really awesome artist tomorrow. It's Connie Jalise, and I'm drawing more Link stuff because my next book is also my first illustrated attempt at. It's also adding illustrations. I love it. Again, I experiment and I'm going for it because why the hell not, right? And I can do this independently. And I realize that it may not, again, down the road, I will do better. But it's not necessarily, again, it's not about being the best. Can I be the most passionate? Can I bring my best A game in terms of what I feel? Because for whatever reason, our feelings, emotions, our hearts in our art translates with people. Yeah. And I'm not there. That is probably the best magic we do. I don't fully understand it, but that's the best thing we do. So I showed you that because I'm having fun and I've gotten better and I'm evolving as I go here. But even so, like 3 months from now, I'll be better. But sorry, go for it.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, like, and it's like I admire it so much, and the reason I just like want to emphasize it, for folks who might be tuning in, is the fact that you keep saying over and over again, like I'm experimenting, like I'm trying, I'm doing something that makes me uncomfortable or that's new or pushing boundaries or what, and that is something that is so easy to say, and it's so hard for myself and a lot of other folks to do. But when you're able to just do it, push through the fear and do it, like that's where creative magic happens. And so I just wanted to take a second to say, like, wow, and kudos to you for that, because you listen to it and you're just like, I need to have an attitude that's a little bit more experimental. I need to have an attitude that pushes boundaries and realize that I can write whatever I want, whenever I want, in whatever medium I want, and it's okay. And it was a worthwhile endeavor, even if it wasn't, the next scene in a manuscript that someone expects or what have you. So huge props to you.
Well, thank you. So I mentioned earlier music. So are you a Linkin Park fan by any chance?
Like, I'm the least cool person imaginable when it comes to music, and I know like 1 to maybe 3 titles if I heard them.
Okay, so I'm going to show this album to people that are, because this is the music I listen to. This is Linkin Park outside their comfort zone. It's called 1,000 Suns. It's a concept album about a nuclear holocaust. Not their typical. They still sound like Linkin Park, but they went in a very different direction. I was terrified. This is what terrifies all of us when we go outside our comfort zone is, well, what if I suck? right? That is literally, it's not like, what if it's bad? What if it's the most terrible thing in the world, right? I finally got over it. I got over it for two reasons. Number one, my sister bought me that book. So my sister basically one of the I made a promise, and I try to keep my promises as much as I can. And one of my promises I made to myself was I would try to draw this year, and that has evolved as time goes on. The other part of it is it's given me a language. Like, it's changed how I write even, because I have a different toolbox I never had before, right? And so, like, when you do that scene or you try to writing this weird thing that maybe only you read, that's okay. What matters is you did it. Oh crap, you've disappeared on me. Hold on a second here. We're coming to the end anyway, so I'm not gonna. Oh, there you go. Hi.
Oh, are you there?
I'm there. You got booted out there for a second.
Oh, I was like, all of a sudden in horror, I was like, it's. I'm only looking at myself now.
Yeah, no, it happened to me. It's like, oh crap. So you're welcome back.
But you were saying your sister bought you the book, and
yeah, so our sister bought me the book, and I made a promise I would try. Like, I would just try, and I would go and I would do it. And it was like, but the other thing too is like, this show kind of forced me to do it, because I'm like, again, I have a visual opportunity with illustrators here, and then you get these like amazing people come draw with you. It's like, I gotta try. If nothing else, I don't mind looking foolish, and the encouragement I have gotten from people that you wouldn't believe, it's like, very cool. And like I said, I sold some pieces too, which is like my very first month. It's like, okay, if that's not a confidence, like, I sold my art faster than I sold my writing, which is a weird thing to actually say. It took me a month to sell my first piece, whereas when I wrote, it took me years, right? So that's a huge confidence, but it's given me a different language. So when I do my stories now, right, they write differently, because it's almost like I've learned a new language. So when you, like, if you got those scenes inside you that are very uncomfortable, yeah, I know it's terrifying, but it doesn't matter if you're the only person that reads them, right? Or maybe you have a significant other that can read them for you, or you find even an audience of just one person, right? The fact that you've done it, when you go back to what makes you your bread and butter, what makes you your living, you'll have a tool you didn't have before. Yeah. And it will make what you already do, what you've already niched into, stronger, because now you have a different, it's almost like learning that those piano lessons have now taught you to see your art perceive it in a different way. And it's now like, yeah, it may not be a big change, but you're like, I have a depth here I did not have before. How did that magically happen?
And like tool, like that's the tools, that's the perfect analogy, like, yeah. Or metaphor rather. It's like, because it's not about changing, it's your voice. It all gets back to your voice. Like, that is your thumbprint, that's there the whole time, and it's just about like nurturing it and equipping it with whatever it needs to succeed. And you get that through consuming other people's art, just as much as practicing it yourself.
So I think we've had a pretty good conversation. We probably should promote your shit at some point here, probably, right? But before we wrap up, I'm going to ask I think a fun question, and then we'll wrap up. So how did you get traditionally published? We're going to go, actually, normally that's a question normally asked at the beginning. But I feel this is a very good way to back at the end, because this was your goal. And we were talking earlier about right place, right time, and luck. And you maybe lucked all the way into it. And that's cool. But I'm curious to how that all played out.
Yeah. So, going back to this whole idea that like every person's journey is different and there's a billion different ways to something. So I actually got published originally on Twitter. So I wrote a manuscript and had been querying it to agents, which for folks tuning in, that's just sort of like a 200 to 300 word business letter that you write to literary agents, where you explain your character and your conflict and your stakes in the hopes that they'll request more material and offer you representation to sell to publishers. So I was definitely doing that. And there was a Twitter pitching contest, of which there are so many now. This one was called #DVPit. So at the time, it was for diverse voices and own voices to pitch, their manuscripts that they're working on, and agents back in 2017 or editors at publishing houses who otherwise wouldn't be in a position to request manuscripts directly from an author, but who cared a lot about the mission and scope of that event, showed up. And so I actually got an offer on my debut from Crooked Lane Books. I took that to agents who were actively considering the manuscript and was able to secure representation in a fabulous friendship with Chris Bucci, who was at Cook McDermott at the time, but now is with Avitas in New York, who's a tremendous advocate and an amazing agent. And so even though I had that offer first, I was like, I really would love an agent to help negotiate a better deal, but also I wrote this other like big gay sex murdery book called Bathhouse that I also would really love for you to be like down to rep. And right from our first conversation, he was like, this is what we're going to do with your debut and X, Y, and Z. And I love this idea of this other book. He loved the book. And so I sort of went about it in an inverse way. I've got friends who wrote it. I've got a friend, John Fram, who wrote the Brightlands, who wrote this like great article. I think it was like in the New York Times or the Atlantic, and an agent saw it and was like, when you're ready with a book, I'm ready for you. There's so many ways to get published, but that was mine. And then once I was sort of in at that point, then I had, an advocate and an agent in Chris. So it was, he took it from there.
So I'm going to correct you on one thing. You are actually a pretty insightful dude. You go with the flow, but you actually you've given a lot of encouragement to a lot of people on this podcast. So thanks for that, and thanks for being a part of the show. And I think we have an interview here. What do you think?
Oh, that's not what we were doing this whole time?
Yeah, I think we have an interview.
I was like, I think we do. I think it's.
Yeah, I'm just.
I had a great time.
Yeah. I'm just asking because we started off with incriminating stuff, which was amazing. That was awesome. We went to expectations, and then we just talked about the craft of writing, which is like a pretty good, I think, hour and a half time for people to listen to. So I just figured, are you happy with it? Did you have a good time?
Yeah, I had a blast, and I guess like my takeaway for anyone tuning in who might be interested in publishing in any path or whatever else is literally go look at a bookstore, go to your favorite indie online e-list catalog or anything else, and really it's all about what you said earlier, which is I just did it. It was uncomfortable, but I did it. And that separates the folks who show up in those lists from those who don't. Nothing else.
Yeah,
you learn talent.
That's right. Hey, it's important. Hey, it's the difference. It's probably the most important thing. That all said, you got a book like Bathhouse is finally coming out in what, June? What is it?
Oh, yep. I have my little e-arc right here. So it's probably super glossy in the light, but Bathhouse.
Yes.
Is out June 15th from Doubleday. It is pitched as Gone Girl with Gays and Grinders. So if you're a fan of thrillers and people behaving badly, hopefully you'd enjoy it. And I'd appreciate anyone's pre-order and book love they want to share. And thank you for giving me the chance to plug it, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to hang out with you for the past hour and a half on your podcast. It was an absolute blast. Started with fire.
Yeah, I know. It started with fire.
It was a great place to start.
So beyond the book, though, how can people find you? Like, if people want to talk to you, hang out with you, ask questions, want want to hear you read that Falcon story? Because I almost how would they do that?
I'm like, if that's the way you're going to frame it, there is no way. I'm unreachable. No, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at pjvernonbooks.com. And of course on Facebook, I think it's just my like old personal Facebook that I've co-opted. So it's Philip Vernon. But always happy to I love hearing from folks and love hearing from readers and love encouraging folks not because it's some sort of like mission, but because it really is something that isn't entirely doable. I have no MFA, never lived in New York, no creative writing training. And you know, it's just tenacity, time.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And I want to thank PJ Vernon. Don't call him Philip Vernon. There.
Well, you got me Phil. Don't call me Phil.
Okay,
Phil.
I won't call. All right, fair enough. Fair enough. So I want to thank Philip for coming on the show, and we had a blast. And dude, you can come back anytime you'd like. It'd be a pleasure. So, assuming you want to do this again sometime. Beyond all that, though, folks, if you want to support this podcast, I am legitimately this close to being an affiliate. So if you want to hit the follow button on Twitch, twitch.tv/JustJoshPodcast, do so. I'm on YouTube as Joshua Pentolaresco. You can listen to this podcast on any platform you'd like. This episode will air on the audio and the YouTube with probably about a week and a half from now. But for everyone listening on Twitch Live tonight, thank you very much. Stay inspired. Keep shining in the dark. And tomorrow it's Drink and Draw with Connie Jolies. So take care, guys.
Thank you so much.
And boom.